Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. So I didn't really expect to be making this. So as I edit this, it looks like Sony and Marvel Studios have parted ways when it comes to co-producing Spider-Man movies, just a few weeks after Far From Home became Sony's highest grossing movie of all time. So this is some pretty huge news, and who knows really, maybe they'll patch things up. Maybe a week or two after this video comes out, they'll announce that they've come to a deal after all, and this entire thing will have just been an overblown story that helped pressure the companies into working together again. But assuming that doesn't happen, well, this obviously has some pretty big consequences for the character. People will probably be quick to blame Sony or maybe Disney over this, and that's whatever. Whether you think Sony was being unreasonable or Disney was just being greedy, I'm not a shareholder in either company, so honestly, it's not that interesting to me. What I am interested in is the future of Spider-Man. I know for many of you, this probably just spells nothing but doom and gloom for the franchise. And I get that. I liked Homecoming and Far From Home a lot, and I was really looking forward to the next entry under Feige's leadership. And for the moment, it looks like that possibility is gone. And if you liked those movies as much as I do, this is really annoying news. But sorry, this isn't gonna be a Sony sucks video. What I really want to focus on is what this could mean for Peter Parker and company going forward. The bad stuff definitely, but also how I hope they'll steer the ship if they're no longer connected to the MCU. So if you're really upset by this situation, I get it, and I really hope they come to a deal. But right now, I want to ask the question, if Spidey is done in the MCU, where should the character go from here?
All you need is a piece of string, and here comes Spider-Man. Avalanche!
One thing people seem really confused on right now is if the Tom Holland version of the character will continue or not, with some people thinking that the end of the Sony Marvel deal means the end of this Spider-Man. The original Deadline story didn't seem to think so, saying that this would just be the end of Feige and Marvel Studios' involvement in the still being made Watts movies. And as far as I know, Holland is still under contract for another film. So for now at least, that's what I'm going to assume. Holland and the rest of the cast are still in, but without any hint of the MCU. And that's kind of weird, right? The Avengers and Tony Stark specifically have been so instrumental to this version of Spider-Man that to drop that would be pretty jarring. There's just no real way of getting around that. But, and okay, this is probably where a portion of my audience gets really mad at me, I do think it would be possible to continue the Holland series without the MCU. If anything, the ending of Far From Home put them in a pretty decent spot to do just that. The last act of Far From Home saw Peter Parker stepping out of Tony's shadow, as he realizes he doesn't need to be the next Iron Man. He's moved past measuring himself against Tony, so I don't think they'd have to mention him. And considering the very end of Far From Home, I think it would make sense to have Peter Parker all alone here. Having his back against the wall and no other heroes to turn to could work. Tom Holland's Spider-Man has always had a lot of important adult figures in his life, whether it was Tony Stark, Happy Hogan, or even Aunt May. The next movie could go in a very different direction, a trial by fire that really forces him to grow up fast, no longer completely sure who he can really count on. I'm not saying they need to make it super grim or anything, but I do think a movie where Peter has to entirely fend for himself, with no fancy tech or private jets, does make a lot of sense for where they left the character. Spider-Man having to think on the fly with no real resources and no help is an idea that falls nicely in line with some of my favorite Spider-Man comics. But that definitely doesn't mean that just dropping the MCU would be easy either. I doubt they'd be able to bring up the blip at all, which I don't think would ruin the movie or anything, but it would definitely be weird. I mean, this is easily the craziest thing to ever happen to Peter, and it would likely, just never be brought up again. If the story and script for the new movie are good enough, I don't think I would mind too much, but it definitely wouldn't be smooth. Like I said, Sony and Disney's deal breaking down definitely isn't the best outcome here. If it did happen, I know that a lot of fans wouldn't exactly have much faith in Sony, and I get why. They've screwed up this franchise in many ways more than once. But I do want to have some hope that they could pull a Spider-Verse and surprise all of us. If I was them and the Marvel deal was totally off the table, I would be trying really hard to get the guys behind Spider-Verse to produce and ideally write the next Tom Holland movie. They've proven that they can nail a lot of these characters, and their quippy style would work really well with the live-action cast. And they could maybe even dive deeper into characters like MJ and Ned, who I liked a lot in Far From Home, but who could definitely use some more time in the spotlight.
The 400. Pardon me. Yes, Spider-Man. Frankly, I'd rather have a banana.
Spider-Man loves bananas.
Another thing I would really hold off on is any sort of crossover with Venom. I'm sure Sony is dying to have Holland, Spider-Man, and Venom in the same movie. They probably can't wait, but they really should. Venom 2 has a new creative team, and the state of Spider-Man Without the MCU is a total question mark. So they should focus on those first. Right now, the idea of a Spider-Man vs. Venom movie sounds pretty forced. But if Venom 2 and the next Spider-Man were both really good and really well received, I'm guessing a lot more people would warm up to the idea. I think they should really use the next Spider-Man movie to dig into some of the criticisms of the last two. This would be a great time to get into Peter's feelings about Uncle Ben by having something happen to him that really gets him to open up about it. Peter and MJ's relationship could also develop and mature a lot, building off where they left off in Far From Home. Basically, if Sony is gonna leave the MCU behind, I don't think they should also try to ape the style of an MCU movie. They should try to at least embrace being different like Spider-Verse did. John Watts is still at the helm, but I'd really like to see him try something new. I really liked the last two movies, but I think if this is really going to be a new era for the character, they should really embrace that by making some stylistic choices that the MCU maybe wouldn't make. Let the scenes breathe a little more, give us more quiet character moments, try to use the movie's biggest perceived weakness, the lack of an MCU connection, by doing stuff we don't always associate with the MCU. I hope they use this opportunity to take some real creative risks that sets the movie apart.
Good job, handsome.
The Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man from the Superhero Collection, each sold separately.
Look, I'm not happy about the split, but when it comes down to it, I really believe in this character. And yeah, that probably sounds corny, but Spider-Man can be great by himself or on a team. If Sony can hire some great writers that care about him as much as the Spider-Verse team did, and not let their obsessive franchise building get in the way, I think we could still have an amazing follow-up to Far From Home. Those are big ifs, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking they won't happen. But at the core of all of these annoying business deals is a character that I'll never get tired of. And maybe that's just enough for me to stay optimistic. So yeah, this has been a tense few days for the Spider-Man fandom. Maybe a little too much. If you want to escape into a different, but probably equally intense fandom, I highly recommend the documentary Trek Nation on Curiosity Stream. As a big Trek fan, I really liked this one. It follows the son of the creator of Star Trek as he really digs into what the show means to people for the first time. And whether you like Trek or not, it's definitely worth checking out. And that's just the beginning. Curiosity Stream has thousands of documentaries to choose from on everything from history, science, sports, and a lot more. All brought to you from the founder of the Discovery Channel. It's only $2.99 a month and available on a ton of devices. You can get it free for a month now at curiositystream.com/CaptainMidnight. That's curiositystream.com/CaptainMidnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and